Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Go Big or Go Home. We are excited to talk to you today, not only about the Big Ten, the college football playoff rankings have come out. I am Old Man Troy, joined by the storytelling youngster, Kevin Cunningham, a.k.a. Kid Cunny on Twitter. How are things going today, buddy?
Things are going well for me. Nothing crazy with me, but this is going to be a very good show. It's going to be very fun. I've been waiting for the show for a while now, so I'm very excited to get it going. But you called me the storytelling youngster, and I remember you telling your little story about, and I don't think it was on this show. I think it was on another show that we do.
No, it was on Saturday. It was on our Saturday show that I told this story about you. So I'll just preface it real quick, like 2 seconds. I'm really sick and tired of people saying they're sorry that Aaron Rodgers got hurt every time I wear my Packers stuff, youngster. That was the story, the short story right there. Yeah, I get fed up. So go ahead.
And understandably so. This doesn't have to do with an injury, but it's basically the same thing, not as impactful. But I was doing a Land of 10 shift, basically covering the Big Ten. And this editor got a piece from a copy editor, got a piece from a Nebraska beat reporter. And they told the beat reporter, they basically said out of thin air, because yesterday afternoon, a 4-star cornerback, number 7 cornerback in the class of 2018, this guy Brendan Radley Hiles. Again, class of 2018, very big. He's a higher 4-star. He was Nebraska's top commit going into yesterday. He was doing these little journals that he would send through Land of 10, and it was just kind of cool because he would be telling his story, going through his, not recruitment because he had already committed to Nebraska, but he decommitted randomly. It was surprising. And so this copy editor told the Nebraska beat reporter in our little channel, he's like, hey, sorry about the Brendan Radley Hiles news. And so it's kind of like the same mold as you, Troy. It's like, oh, sorry for Aaron Rodgers, being hurt for the rest of the year. Oh, sorry, Nebraska beat reporter, that you just lost your top prospect for next year. My bad. Sorry about that. And so I laughed because it's like, okay, what does this beat reporter say? I mean, yes, I'm very, sad. Thank you for your condolences on this cornerback decommitting from Nebraska for a year from now. So it just made me chuckle because it's like, what do you say? It's just kind of a comment that it's like, cool. I mean, yep, you're sorry, and I guess it sucks, kind of, but it doesn't really impact my personal life. But so they went on, the beat reporter went on to say, like, yeah, I was looking forward to covering this person's collegiate career. But it just reminded me of your story, Troy, because it's like, it was just such a little niche thing, like, oh, sorry about this player for this team that, in your case you like, in this case for this reporter that they cover. But it was just funny to me. I got a chuckle out of it. Maybe I'm stupid for chuckling at it, but that was my little, it turned into a longer story than I wanted it to. But I will stop rambling finally. But people saying they're sorry about players, teams that other people like, whether they get hurt, they decommit, whatever, bad news for your team, oh, I'm sorry about that. It just made me chuckle. I'll finally shut up.
Well, it made you chuckle because I brought it up about wanting to gouge people's eyes out when they keep telling me they're sorry about Aaron Rodgers. I mean, like, who cares? Right. My life is going on. He wasn't like my bestie or anything like that. And even if my best friend broke his collarbone, I wouldn't want people to say I'm sorry.
Right.
Yeah, he plays for my favorite team. Okay, so be it. He got hurt. You don't have to be sorry about that, but it is what it is. Let's get back to where we want to go. I mean, it's going to be a great show. My day started off on a whirlwind. Those that listen in probably know I've been getting my car fixed, car problems. Thought it was fixed. Youngster, $1,800 I paid to get her fixed. Got her back, drove it for 2 days, went to the gas station at 3 a.m. Yes, 3 a.m. And as I'm going to get gas, check engine light comes on at an intersection. I'm like, oh, you got to be kidding me. I drive through the intersection, and yet another light comes on, a little lightning bolt, red parentheses. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. That's how my day started at 3 a.m. So I'm very excited very excited, probably going to get worked up a little bit about the college football playoff ranking. But before we get into that, you said you had another point to bring up. I'm going to turn it back over to you because I'm like you. I'm giddy. I'm excited. College football rankings are out, and I'm ready to talk about them.
So finally, 3 weeks ago, Troy and I made our first Go Big or Go Home lock of the week. And I forgot exactly what it was, but it paid off. If you bet, we do our little lock of the week every week, and we don't necessarily have to pick one game. We don't have to pick 4 or 5. We don't have to pick 0. Just if we agree on something as far as a bet goes, like Vegas odds, like Iowa -6 at Northwestern, just a completely random example, we'll say, yes, if we were to bet this, if we had to bet it, we would bet this way. We're both in agreement. That's our lock of the week. 3 weeks ago, we had one. It hit. 2 weeks ago, Troy had one. I didn't necessarily agree with it. So we, Go Big or Go Home, did not have a lock of the week a couple weeks ago. Last week, we had 2 of them. For some reason, I cannot find which exactly 2 they were. I know that a week ago, and I'll be able to bring it up very shortly here. But I think we had Michigan State. No, we had Northwestern. Northwestern was an underdog at home to ranked Michigan State. And we said, yeah, well, Northwestern's going to win that game. We don't care that Michigan State's ranked. And it was not funny, but Michigan State's plane that they were going to take to Northwestern a couple days prior, and this was after we made our lock of the week that Northwestern would win. But Michigan State's plane, Michigan State couldn't take their plane to Northwestern. There was something faulty with it. I forgot what it was. So they had to take a bus. So it was even more annoying.
I think Michigan, I'm going to interrupt you here. I think the airport in Michigan should probably go under some renovations or get new airplanes. Because if you remember back to the NCAA tournament, Michigan had problems with their plane. Now Michigan State I don't know if they went through the same airport, but if they did, if I'm a sports team, never am I going to that airport, ever. Because that's 2 Michigan teams in college sports that have had problems with their plane. Continue.
Yeah. But so we took Northwestern. They won outright. They were underdogs by 4 or 5, whatever points. We said Northwestern would win straight up. So if you took that bet, there you go. There's more money for you. 2-0 on Go Big or Go Home locks of the week. We also picked Penn State to cover, and they lost 39-38. And, well, Penn State covered that as well. So Penn State did not win. I thought Penn State would win. I think, Troy, you thought that Penn State would win outright. They were underdogs by 6 points or 5 points, something ridiculous. I think it was 6. And we said, that's way too many. We think Penn State's probably the better overall team. So even though on the road, night game at Ohio, that's okay. We'll take Penn State and the points. And they delivered on it. If you took that bet to the bank, there you go. You're welcome. Go Big or Go Home. Locks of the week. 3 weeks old. We are 3-0. So
yeah, well, we're going to talk about that game, youngster, because I bet you Vegas at probably about the beginning of the 4th quarter, they were counting their cash that they were getting from all these people that thought that they were going to take and cover the spread, the 6 points. They really faltered here. They faltered big time. We're going to talk about that. But this college football ranking, I can't wait to talk about it. I really can't. Let's get going. I'm going to let you go through. We don't need to go through all top 25, but I think if we go through maybe all the way through the one-loss teams, I think that might do it, and then we can get started.
Yeah, pretty much. I will, I guess, start with this, that I'll save my reactions to it. At number 1, you have Georgia. And this, again, like we've been saying for the last few weeks, I'm glad that the first college football playoff rankings wait 9 weeks in, and all these teams have basically played 8 games by now. Usually you have a bye in there. So I'm glad that they wait. And realistically, I mean, we talked even in the preseason leading up to the college football season, why do these polls come out so early? We always talked about the AP poll because that's what everybody and their mother goes by when talking about these teams and where they're ranked up until the college football playoff poll. Now I could not care less about the AP poll. who's where in the AP, that means zero, nothing, nada. Does not matter. The College Football Playoff Committee has their own ranking system, and the top 4 at the end of the season go on to play in the top 4. It doesn't matter if the AP has the number 3 team at number 20 in their poll. The AP means nothing now, basically, is how I look at it. So these rankings are what matter. I love that they wait 9 weeks in to the college football season to do it. Everyone's played basically 8 games, like I said. University of Miami has played 7 because of hurricane stuff. But regardless, number 1, finally, these rankings have come out. Number 1, Georgia. Alabama's been number 1 all year. Apparently not to the College Football Playoff Committee. I'll get into, probably why Georgia is number 1, and there's quotes from the chairman of the College Football Playoff Committee has, since then kind of gone on the record about why these teams are ranked where they are currently. Doesn't mean that's how it will be 5-6 weeks from now, but this is why they're ranked currently. He has talked about that. We'll obviously talk about that in the next few minutes, but Georgia is number 1, Alabama is number 2. It's not like Alabama was far off. Notre Dame was number 3, and I texted you, Troy. I was very curious to see where Notre Dame would end up. And here they are. Notre Dame, the top 1-loss team in the country, according to the College Football Playoff Committee. Right now, they'd be in the playoff. Again, you've got a number of games to go. You've got 4 or 5 games left for some of these teams. There is still a long way to go. But right now, Notre Dame is number 3. That's the only team, it was the only team that Michigan State lost to up until last week when we both picked Northwestern, and won, I'm sure, a ton of you some money as you put down your bets on our lock of the week. A little kidding there. But Notre Dame, number 3. Clemson, number 4, also a 1-loss team. Oklahoma, number 5, also a 1-loss team. Finally, the first Big Ten team at number 6, Ohio State, a 1-loss team. Number 7, Penn State, a 1-loss team. TCU, a 1-loss team at number 8. And finally, there's Wisconsin at number 9 at 8-0. I'll finish with the top 10. There's Miami at 7-0. Like I said, they missed a game because of a hurricane. But 7-0 at this point. Wisconsin's 8-0. They're number 9 in the country. Miami's 7-0. They're number 10 in the country. There are 6 1-loss teams ahead of Wisconsin. That's your top 10. Troy, I'm sure you've got a lot about this top 10.
Just a little bit. I had to take myself off mute there, so finally got back. I'm gonna start with the undefeateds, and so as you see, Wisconsin at number 9. And I know I hear people, Badger fans, I can't believe we're number 9. Well, I can believe you're number 9 because you're about the 9th best team in the country. I'm okay with this. I have no problem seeing Wisconsin. I'm glad Wisconsin's in the top 10. But when you look at the 1-loss teams in front of them, I may say this. I maybe put them ahead of TCU. Maybe put them up there. Because I think Wisconsin defensively, they wouldn't handle TCU, but they got a good defense. And when I look at TCU and the loss, I think Wisconsin maybe deserved to be ahead of TCU. But did I think when this football poll was going to come out that I was going to see Wisconsin in the playoff? No. I didn't even think. I didn't even think they'd be close. They're about where I thought they'd be. And I'm okay with that. I've been saying this from week 1 that Wisconsin got some love from the AP voters, and they're not getting the love from the College Football Committee. 1, strength of schedule. That is huge in this poll. That is one of the reasons why Georgia's number 1. It's going to go down to beating ranked teams. Look at Wisconsin's schedule. It's not very hard. They should be winning. Second of all, the style of play. They play great defense, but they have no offense. You look at the guys ahead of them, how do they get into a shootout with any of those teams? They don't. There's a reason. If I'm on the committee, I may not even have them in the top 10, Kevin. So I'm okay. I wanted to start there because being from Wisconsin and you at one point living in Wisconsin, I'm sure you got a lot of Badger fan friends, as we're alum of the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater. Had to get a plug in there, youngster, for our old school. We both have spent time in Wisconsin. We no longer live there. But Badger fans, you know what? Take a real look at this team. Are they a college football playoff team? My answer, no. Could they work up from number 9 into the top 4? They would need a lot of help because the Michigan game is no longer a big deal. Because as I scrolled down, youngster, I saw no Michigan in the top 25. So that game means nothing. We thought that was the game to circle, the game that could be pivotal for Wisconsin. The lead that they have in their division and that game against Michigan, to be honest right now, I'm not even excited for it. It's another game. It doesn't matter. It's not going to help them in the ranking. It can only hurt if they lose. The only game that's going to matter is that Big Ten championship game. Yeah. And at that point, with the way that this rolled out with the Big Ten teams, that may not even propel them anywhere. So Badger fans, you got to be real. You got to be real about your team, what your team is about. Look at their schedule. It hasn't been very hard. Honestly, they should be undefeated at this point. They should be undefeated to the Big Ten championship game now. That's the way I'm looking at it. And honestly, Kevin, they may not even move up in the football playoff ranking. They may stay at number 9 the rest of the way. That's all I want. I'm going to start there. I want to get your thoughts because I don't want to just have people listen to my voice. So I think we'll do it this way. I got my things. You went through the top 10. I'm going to throw teams out, talk about teams, and then I'm going to get your thoughts, and then I'll come back to me and pick another team and talk about them. How does that sound?
Sounds perfect. So you want to start with Wisconsin, I'm assuming. I will go with this, that I think they will move up as time progresses, and that's because, and you said they need a lot of help, and I think that they'll get help eventually as the season wears along. I think that Penn State or Ohio State could very well lose going forward, and if Wisconsin is to get all this help, and you're talking about the Badgers in the college football playoff, that means that they're going undefeated. They cannot lose a game from here on out. Anytime you lose a game from here on out, whether you're Wisconsin, whether you're Alabama, Georgia, whoever, if you lose a game from this point, there are obviously a number of one-loss teams, undefeated teams who are right there to take your spot. The top 2, according to the chairman, was pretty clear that he loved Georgia's, and you mentioned it, their strength of schedule and what they had done to this point. Beating Notre Dame was huge. That's Notre Dame's only loss, is losing by a point to Georgia. So that was a obviously monumental game because the committee thinks that both of those teams are very elite. But they have basically said that they put teams 3 through 8 kind of in the same category, not necessarily that TCU is right there with Notre Dame at number 3, but you've got all these one-loss teams ahead of teams like Wisconsin, ahead of Miami, because those teams necessarily haven't really beaten anybody. They have had a number of close games. I know Miami's had a number of close games. And so those teams just haven't looked that impressive, not necessarily because they just keep winning. Obviously, that's impressive. But, again, if you're not beating a Notre Dame, a Georgia, a Penn State, and Oklahoma, then you just don't have those signature wins. But so to go back to Wisconsin finally, I think that, again, Wisconsin has to win out. And I think all these teams realistically have to win out unless you are Georgia or Alabama, in which realistically I think you basically have to win out and then lose a close game to the other one. I think that's how it's going to have to work out for those two if they both want to make it. Obviously, one of them will. I mean, I expect completely that both of them will be undefeated going into the the SEC championship game. But for Wisconsin, I think you're absolutely going to get one of those teams to lose. And if you run the table, you're 13-0, and you beat an Ohio State at the end of the year, you beat a Penn State at the end of the year with one loss, that's going to be huge. You will be seen as better than whoever you just beat, Penn State or Ohio State, and whichever one-loss team is out there from basically any conference, in my opinion, once you get that Big Ten championship win. So I think as things unfold, as a team like TCU loses, as a team like Oklahoma might lose to Oklahoma State, to TCU, maybe in the Big 12 championship game, there are a lot of opportunities for Notre Dame to lose. Clemson, I think, has a pretty easy road going forward. But again, things have changed dramatically over the course of 1 week, according to this committee. Even just last year, you would see a team at I think the team at number 6 last year jumped into the top 4. I think that was Ohio State, if I'm not mistaken. I think Ohio State a year ago didn't even play in the Big Ten title game and vaulted up to number 4 in the last rankings to get to, it wasn't Ohio State. It was some other team that it didn't really make sense how much they vaulted that last weekend. But these rankings are very volatile, and these rankings can change at any given time. I just think a team like Oklahoma can lose. Notre Dame can absolutely lose. Georgia, Alabama will end up with 1 loss. One of them will, for sure. Ohio State, Penn State, whoever Wisconsin were to beat in the Big Ten title game would obviously get another loss. That would propel Wisconsin. I do not think TCU ends up going the distance. Oklahoma and TCU can't run the table going forward. So Wisconsin's got an easy schedule, no doubt about it. But these teams ahead of them, almost all of them have very easy loss potentials going forward, in my opinion, basically outside of Clemson. So as long as Wisconsin's up there and close and near the top 4, which at number 9 with this many games left, that's close in my opinion. They obviously can make it, but again, you've got to win out, which they should, and then pull an upset in the Big Ten title game, which is kind of what we've been thinking since before the year even started.
Well, you brought up this Clemson name, Kevin, and I'm going to move right to Clemson. If you look at all the one-loss teams below them, you take a look at Oklahoma, they lost to an Iowa State team. Not a bad Iowa State team, not a great team. I believe they're ranked 14th in the AP poll, and I'm not sure where they rolled out in the football ranking. I don't remember. You got an Oklahoma team that that was their loss to Iowa State. You got Penn State, who lost to Ohio State. Ohio State lost to Oklahoma. You look at these losses from the teams that are in the top 10, and they weren't like horrid losses. The only sore thumb that you have here, Clemson. I know people say it's a blip on the radar. You lost to a porous Syracuse team. And I'm going to say you lost bad. How do you give up that many points to a porous Syracuse team? So I know the body of work that people look at and the strength of schedule. Well, if you're going to look at strength of schedule, you got to look at strength of losses. And that loss to me, it just sits with me. I don't care about everybody thinks, well, Clemson this and Clemson that and Clemson won the national. I don't give a rat's behind, youngster. They lost to Syracuse. And everyone below them has what I'm going to call a quality loss. A loss against a team that was pretty darn good. So You know what? Boo-hoo on you, Clemson, for ruining your parade. Apparently the committee doesn't see it that way, but the old man does. I don't think Clemson should be sniffing the top 4 right now, Kevin. I think they should be behind Oklahoma. They should be behind Penn State. They should be behind Ohio State. Because those teams lost to quality opponents, whereas Clemson lost to the Syracuse Orange. Who the heck is Syracuse football? And you know what? I know they go out and play, and good for you, Syracuse. What a win. What a recruiting tool to help get players to Syracuse. Good for you. For Clemson, boo-hoo on you. You did it to yourself. But I think they should be below all of those other teams I just mentioned, Kevin. I don't think they should be in the top 4. What are your thoughts?
I hear you, and I'm with you. Again, when you look at all these teams' losses, they're miles better. I think there is a such thing as a good loss. Notre Dame losing to Georgia by 1 point is absolutely a good loss. There's no question about it. I think it was last year or 2 years ago, Louisville lost to Florida State on the last play of the game, or vice versa. Whatever that was, those were both elite teams. I think it was a year ago. And that was a quality loss. I don't even remember who won the game because it was something like a tipped pass at the end of the game, deflected the right way, and the team won, or like a pass interference call was blatantly not called, or I forgot what happened exactly, but regardless of how the game even finished, I didn't even care who ended up winning. It was impressive by both teams. Two elite teams battled to the last play, and it was decided one way or another. I literally don't even remember. Because to me, whoever lost, it was a good loss. Whoever won, it was a great win because it was over an elite team, but whoever lost, that was a great loss to me. I think there is such thing as good losses. But so, yes, Oklahoma is that one, or Clemson is that one team that absolutely does not measure up in terms of, hey, here's our one loss. Well, it's a quality one. So even though we lost that game, take it for what it's worth. It's like Notre Dame losing to Georgia. That's okay. Ohio State could lose to Georgia very easily. Any team could lose to Georgia very easily. Any team could lose to any of these, I think, top 9 teams very easily. I don't consider Miami in the same class as these other ones, and I don't think TCU is completely up there either. But TCU can beat anyone. Miami can beat anyone. Wisconsin can beat anyone. Any of these top 10 teams, Oklahoma State, Washington, for sure. I think that's where it probably really dips off is after 12. But in Clemson's case, the chairman said that, hey, your quarterback was out for the second half of that game against Syracuse. He came back against Georgia Tech a week ago. They saw how dominant Clemson looked with him back and said, yeah, we know you lost and you're going to be down here at 4, but we're not dropping you lower than that because, for one, your quarterback's back. He's now 100% healthy going forward. It was a head thing. I think it was a concussion. He's back. Your whole team's back. We're assuming that if this quarterback was playing against Syracuse the entire game, you wouldn't have lost. So they dinged him a little bit for that loss, but not a lot. I guess that's the caveat. That's the reasoning for Clemson being number 4 as opposed to being lower, like you said, and I agree with you. I think they should be dinged probably down to 7. I think if you move Oklahoma, Ohio State, Penn State up 1 a slot each, and even TCU, I'd have to see who they lost to. But Clemson losing to Syracuse, whether your quarterback was out for a half or not, Clemson should not lose to Syracuse. That loss, I understand. I give you a little more credit since your quarterback was out in the second half, but not that much like the committee did.
So what happens if their quarterback gets hurt in the playoff? They're going to lose. So I don't like that excuse. I don't agree with it. I'm very stern on this. Clemson should be, like you said, number 7. You can put them ahead of TCU. That's fine. They're a good team. Do I think that they're one of the best 4? They could be, but they lost. And if you're doing a ranking, you've got to throw it out there. I'm gonna bring up Notre Dame. They're the 1-loss team right ahead of Clemson. This is one of those where you were talking, Kevin, throw the AP poll out. Notre Dame was kind of rising and making move in the top 25, and I'm not even sure where their ranking is right now. I think they're 8, 7, somewhere in there.
For the AP, Notre Dame, something like that, yeah.
Yes, they're in the middle of the pack of the top 10 somewhere.
Yeah.
But you look at it, and this is a team that was 1 point away from dislodging Georgia. And a team that probably hasn't been talked about a lot. Maybe a surprise. This is probably a surprise top 4 team. But like you said, there's a lot of season left, and Notre Dame just got to take care of business. And actually these top 4 teams really just need to take care of business. Could there be some shuffling? Could be. Because, again, now you have a committee. So if Notre Dame goes out and wins, and it's a sloppy win, or it's a last-second win against a lesser opponent, and Oklahoma goes out and throttles and wins, I mean, you could see the jump. But right now, Notre Dame is doing nothing but going out and winning. And a team that probably not a lot thought would be in the top 4 at the end of the year. Doesn't mean they're going to be. But I'll tell you what, hats off to Notre Dame. Now, again, there's still a lot of season to go. But again, Kevin, this is why. You mentioned it in the beginning of the show. College football ranking comes out now. why the heck don't we start the AP poll till later? Because I guarantee Notre Dame would be up near the top 10. They didn't even start the season in the top 25. I don't believe. I'd have to go back and look, but I don't think Notre Dame was in the top 25 to start the season. Now they're one of the top 4 college football teams. So that preseason ranking, just to go back to it, is a bunch of baloney. It means nothing, even though we talk about it. You need to wait to do your polls. But Notre Dame, to me, Kevin, just a team. I look at Notre Dame. Can they match up against teams? Yeah. But they're really playing good team football. For those listening in, if you're just a casual football fan, unless you're a Notre Dame fan, I need you to name me 2 or 3 guys that are dominant players off of Notre Dame's schedule. Not a lot of people can do it, youngster. They can't. This is a Notre Dame team that just goes out and plays good football, and they win games. And like I said, almost dislodged Georgia, which, of course, is a feather in their cap. There's that quality loss. Committee's looking at it from that standpoint. Take that game away, they've done nothing but win. They've done nothing but win. They got a win over Michigan State. There's another quality win. And you look at their schedule. They're doing what they need to do, taking care of business. I'm okay with Notre Dame being number 3. I know there's a lot of people that aren't. A lot of people that think Oklahoma, Ohio State, Penn State should have taken that place where Notre Dame is. But I look at Notre Dame. They're a good team. They deserve to be there. I'm okay with Notre Dame falling in at number 3 in the first college football ranking. What about you?
Yeah, I'm cool with it. This is, again, the first college football playoff ranking of the year. I mean, in the end, it doesn't mean too much because, again, these rankings are volatile, and it's just like the AP poll in the sense that the number 3 team can lose, like Notre Dame, and they can fall to 12. That could very easily happen. There's not much difference between the AP poll and College Football Playoff Committee in terms of that. You're not going to see number 3 lose to a average team and fall only to 5 or 6. That's not how it works. It's of the same.
I'm going to jump in right here, youngster, because otherwise I'll forget my point. The thing you're bringing up, and I kind of alluded to it a little bit, is this is a different type poll. These committee members, they're not just looking at the final score. They're putting together a resume of a top-tier playoff. So, therefore, that's why I said if Notre Dame looks sloppy in a win against a lesser opponent, even if everybody else wins, Notre Dame could drop. They could drop out next week if they go out and lay an egg, so to speak, but still get a win. And that's the thing I like about the college football playoff ranking, is that they are actually looking at the body of work. They're not looking at the box score. They're actually looking at how is this team playing. So let's say Notre Dame, they start at 3, but the next 4 weeks they hit a wall and they methodically win games. They've got to go on 2-minute drives against lesser opponents to win games. The committee's going to take that into consideration. You know what? Notre Dame may not be one of the top 4 teams in college football right now. That's what I like about it. I had to throw it in there before I forgot about that point, youngster.
Yeah, I have had 0 issues with how the College Football Playoff Committee has come up with its 4 teams by the end of it. I have never had an issue with it. You can certainly make the argument that Penn State was better than Ohio State a year ago. I think they proved it on the field, which is something that's interesting to me because they talked about it this year, how head-to-head does indeed matter. That's why Oklahoma has not looked as good as Ohio State the last 6 weeks, but Oklahoma's number 5, Ohio State's number 6. They said the reason is Oklahoma went to Ohio State and won pretty convincingly. So it's really hard to put Ohio State ahead of Oklahoma. They're 1 spot apart, but that head-to-head really means something. Even over the last 6 weeks, Ohio State's looked much better than Oklahoma has. Oklahoma's defense has looked much worse. Their offense isn't as good, and Ohio State's offense is miles better than what it was against Oklahoma. They proved that against the number 1 scoring defense against Penn State when they put up 39 points. So Ohio State's looked much better, but head-to-head does indeed matter.
And that's where I disagree with the committee right there. I disagree with the head-to-head because it's when is the head-to-head played. That was early in the season. That was early in the season. Oklahoma was much better at that time. Ohio State maybe still putting some pieces together. They put the pieces together. You know, Barrett, he's figured some stuff out since then. I mean, you were critical of Barrett. And I'm not saying that he's corrected all of his deficiencies because some of it has been against lesser opponents, but they're playing better. Barrett's playing better. Look what he did against Penn State. We're going to talk about it maybe. I mean, our show could go 8 hours the way we're going at it. But Barrett has done some better things the last few games. This is where I disagree with the committee about head-to-head. You have to look at where the head-to-head was played, at what time of the season. And if it's more than 3 games ago, I'm throwing it out the window. It doesn't matter to me in college football because a lot of things can change in college football over 3 weeks. So I'm going to disagree. I'm going to let you continue.
Oh, yeah, it still matters to me, but 6 weeks is pushing it. I mean, Ohio State, for the last month and a half, has looked better than Oklahoma, no question about it. And you add a win against Penn State, and it's like, yeah, Ohio State deserves to be ahead of Oklahoma. I believe so as well. But again, they're one spot behind. There's 5 weeks left of this thing to come out. So it is what it is. There's 6 weeks total. The first week is done of these college football playoff rankings. So we've got 5 more to go. There's plenty of time for number 6 to catch up to number 5. I'm not worried about it whatsoever. I may disagree with a spot here and there, but in the end, again, these top 9 teams, top 10 teams, you could even make the case top 12, arguably 13, kind of control their own destiny in the fact that if they win out, if Washington wins out, they would need a little help at number 12, but they would finish 12-1 with a number of very quality victories. They'd need a few teams to lose ahead of them for sure, but even Washington, if they finish 12-1, winners of the Pac-12, they only have 1 loss against Washington State, who can score. That's not a terrible loss. So, yeah, Washington would be knocking right on the door, and that's a number 12. So Wisconsin at 9, Miami undefeated. If they finish the year undefeated, of course they would be in the top 4. Basically any of the top 12 teams, in my opinion, can still make it. Virginia Tech's kind of pushing it. Auburn for sure with 2 losses. You've got 2 losses, you're done. And the only other 1-loss team outside the top 13 would be Memphis at 23. They're obviously not getting in. If you're a team like that from a group of 5 school, you've got to go undefeated for sure. Even UCF is undefeated. They're number 18. But so I guess head-to-head matters. I'm with you, Troy, that I kind of throw it out the window. It's still in the back of my head for sure. But over the last 6 weeks, I think Ohio State's proven that they're better than Oklahoma. But again, there are 5 more installations of these rankings to take place, 5 more weeks to go in the season. Plenty can change, but the top 12 to me still very viable in terms of making the top 4. I guess that's all I have with that for whichever team I guess we were talking about there.
Yeah, and then when I look at this, and I look at in lieu of our show, we could dissect this whole top 12, top 13, and say why we like it, why we dislike it. But I think that we've done enough, unless you've got any other points about this ranking. I mean, when you look at it, I think we touched on the big ones. Alabama, Georgia, number 1, number 2. We talked about Notre Dame. We talked about Clemson. We really didn't talk about Ohio State, Penn State, Oklahoma. We did a little bit. They fall in there. They're right there on the cusp. We mentioned a little bit about TCU. We mentioned a little bit about Wisconsin. I don't have anything else to gripe about or to applaud about for the college football ranking. I would like to get into the Big Ten stuff because, man, it's just as exciting now as we're getting to that, I call it the downhill part of the schedule where you're getting to the back end and these games mean so much as we move forward. But do you have anything else with the football ranking? If not, let's start our segment of reviewing last weekend's games.
Yeah, I'll say this. I've got a quick point with, again, I think the top 12 can absolutely still make the top 4 by the end of the year, for sure, without a doubt. Little help for those teams toward the bottom, but especially if you're Wisconsin at 8-0, Miami at 7-0, you finish undefeated, you're in the top 4. You're not getting left out. If you're Wisconsin or Miami and you're undefeated, my last point with Notre Dame, there basically, if you don't know much about Notre Dame, their quarterback completes 51% of his passes. Okay, you've got a running back who averages almost 9 yards a carry. That's Notre Dame. That guy, Josh Adams, he's absolutely going to be a Heisman finalist as long as Notre Dame keeps winning, for sure, and he could absolutely win the Heisman. Averaging 9 yards a carry. I mean, they are a run and play defense type team. Wimbush, the quarterback, again, completes 51% of his passes. He can run. Notre Dame, to this point, just looking at their schedule, you beat NC State a week ago by 21 points. NC State's a pretty good team. You beat Michigan State by 20 points. That's a pretty decent team. Outside of that, you don't have many great victories except for USC and beating them by 35. So my point being that Notre Dame has done the work that they have been put in front of them. I mean, you take care of USC, you take care of Michigan State, you take care of NC State. The wins are there, and in 2 weeks, they go at Miami. So that's going to be a battle of 2 top 10 teams for sure. At the end of the year, Notre Dame at Stanford. That's going to be a quality game as well. I'm looking for Stanford here. They're number 21 in the playoff polls. Michigan, just for what it's worth, was supposedly right on the fringe of being in this top 25. So they're like 26, 27, something like that, the chairman said. But so Notre Dame's got a couple hard games left, but that's it. I mean, you've got Wake Forest, you've got Navy. Those should be wins. But at Miami, that'll be tough. I think Notre Dame wins it. And then at Stanford is basically the play-in game, in my opinion, for Notre Dame to get into the college football playoff. In the end, I think they win that too. I don't think they are a super strong team because of their quarterback play, but it's a ground and pound team. It's a lot like Wisconsin, realistically, except you've got a mobile quarterback instead of a pocket passer. That's basically the difference. I don't think Notre Dame is going to win the whole thing.
What'd you say? Wisconsin has a pocket passer? Wisconsin has a passer? Holy crap, youngster. Why are you giving them kudos? I know we're going to talk about this game, but, man, I can't believe you said the Badgers have a pocket passer. They've got a pocket player. They got a guy that can take the ball and go back in the pocket. Yeah, I'm being very critical right now because I was not impressed in the last game. So I had to interrupt you because you made me chuckle. That's the word of the day. You mentioned it earlier. I chuckle when you say Wisconsin has some resemblance of quarterback play. I don't think they do.
I understand. I think he's more of a pocket guy than an out-of-pocket improvising type guy, scrambling type guy is exactly what I meant there. Not that they have dynamic quarterback play from the pocket. That's for sure. But that's Notre Dame in a nutshell. You've got a couple hard games left. They're at number 3. If they win out, they're going to be in the top 4 for sure. But they are not this team that's this dynamite team you just haven't heard of. They've got a good defense, and they've got an immaculate running attack. That's Notre Dame. Finally, we can move on to the Big Ten, though.
And what a weekend it was, youngster! Woo! I'm telling you. At this time of the college football season, it's like this. The NFL is at the midway point. So it's kind of like, we talked about it on our other show that we do for the Saturday. You know, teams are starting to separate themselves. You got in the NFL, you got your good teams, the teams that are right there right now. The middle of the pack, there's a couple that can maybe come through, and then the bad team. So the NFL to me is like, you're in the middle of the season. Right now, college football, I'm even more excited at this time. November college football, to me, Kevin, is the best time of the year. It's almost even better than the opening weekend to me because now you're starting to get some games that matter. I'm excited. Going to turn it back over to you. Let's start going over the games from the past weekend. However you want to roll through it, I don't care. I'm along for the ride.
My last point, finally, before we get into Big Ten talk, Notre Dame was, Troy. They were a team receiving votes in the preseason. So, yeah, at the AP, if you can hold on to your little weekly rankings, especially the preseason ones, you want to kind of throw those out the window, that'd be just fine. Finally, I will start with Wisconsin and Illinois. 24-10, Wisconsin wins the game. Second half was completely tied. 7-7. Wisconsin was able to run the football, kind of, sort of. Jonathan Taylor got hurt. I think it was in the second quarter. I don't think he played in the second half, but 12 carries, 73 yards, 6 yards a carry. He was doing his thing until he got hurt. I don't think it's a serious injury whatsoever. He might miss a week, I think, is the last I saw. I'll have to look more in depth during the show. But in short, I mean, Wisconsin was able to run the football kind of, sort of, with Taylor while he was healthy. Hornibrook, the quarterback that Troy just banged on, 10 of 19, 135 yards, 7 yards an attempt, no touchdowns, 1 pick. Did not do well against an Illinois defense that is not a good one.
And if you saw any of those 9 incompletions, I'm wondering how many footballs the man on the moon has. He was missing guys left and right. 19 passes. You were 10 of 19 against Illinois. 10 of 19. That's almost just a hair over 50%. And I'm going to go back now, and I'm going to kind of switch the table. You talked about completion percentage. 50%, 55%. When I was growing up, Kevin, that was pretty darn good. Now in today's world, you got to be up near that 60, 63%. Really. That's the way it is, the way that offenses are set up, and especially Wisconsin. It's not like he was 10 of 19 and they went deep on like 18 of them. Things are intermediate. Things are short. And this guy can't even complete them. I was really upset watching this game. Like, the man on the moon, hope he has good hands, because that's where those balls were going. And I'm like, what are you doing? I thought this was – I used to think, well, let this guy develop. Let this guy develop. Maybe he has an upside. Well, after last game, I've lost all that. I'm like, here we go again, because it was a horrid performance. Horrid. Just horrid, Kevin. The good thing is Taylor gets hurt, and what does Wisconsin do? They just throw another guy in there and let the other guy run. They threw 2 more guys in there, let 2 more guys run. It's got to be great being a Wisconsin running back, knowing you play behind a big, burly offensive line, and you can just get the ball. At least Hornibrook can hand the ball off, so he's good for that. And as you can see, I am very critical right now, Kevin, because I did not like the way he played. I was not happy at all. I know they can't bench him. I know they're not going to bench him. But that's why I'm going to go back to the beginning of the show. When the rankings came out and Wisconsin was number 9, Badger fans who were upset, put the Illinois game tape in and watch your quarterback play. That's why they're number 9. Because the guy couldn't hit the broadside of a barn against Illinois, a team that he probably should have had around 200 yards passing. Doesn't seem like, oh, that's not a great day. For a Wisconsin quarterback, that's a great day. For a guy to go 10 of 19, that's poo-poo day. He should have been at least 15 for 19, especially the way they play. So back to it, Badger fans, if you're upset about the ranking, put in the Illinois game, watch Hornibrook play. That's why they're number 9. Turning it back over to you, youngster.
Yeah, absolutely. You said it perfectly. That's why the College Football Playoff Committee put them at number 9. Being undefeated is great, but when you beat teams that aren't that great on a consistent basis, you have to question them. You know, how good are you? If you're an Ohio State level team, you should be crushing Illinois by 40 points, like Ohio State did to Army and UNLV and Maryland and Rutgers and whichever the 5th team was before they played Penn State for their 6th straight win. You've got to blow out these cupcakes, especially if you lose to them. That's atrocious. So hats off to Wisconsin for winning them. Again, there was that one week where 4 top 10 teams lost to teams that were not ranked. They shouldn't have lost, but they did. So, yes, Wisconsin deserves credit for that. That's why they're number 9 in the country, is because you get credit for winning, especially all Big Ten games. It's not complete cupcake city. Yes, you should be winning. They are winning. That's good. You're number 9. If you keep winning, you'll move up because other teams will lose inevitably. So the college football playoff is still in Wisconsin's sights. Just keep winning. But when you play against Illinois and you tie them in the second half to 7-7, that's not looking too great. So the quality of your victory matters. These college football playoff committee, it's kind of their job. I mean, it's not 100% their job to sit down and watch every single game possible. But again, like I mentioned, it's kind of down to the top 12 at this point. If you want to put Virginia Tech in there, feel free. We can say top 13 for right now. Outside of the top 13, it doesn't matter. Auburn's number 14. They've got 2 losses. Iowa State, 2 losses. Mississippi State, 2 losses. USC, 2 losses. You've got UCF. They would need a ton of help and to go undefeated. Then there's LSU, 2 losses. My point, the top 13 teams still have a shot whatsoever. Virginia Tech, Washington would need a lot of help. But in general, you're Wisconsin, you're undefeated, you still have a chance, just keep winning. But in order to compete with these other 12 teams, they're kind of still vying for the Final Four. You've got to beat teams like Illinois impressively, and they just didn't. That's all I have to say about that. Jonathan Taylor also listed as questionable for the Indiana game this upcoming Saturday, November 4th. So questionable with a left leg injury. Again, it's not super serious. It's just something to keep an eye on going forward. If it keeps lingering, how he looks running, it's something to look for, not something to panic about. Going on to, I guess we can go with the super crazy interesting games. First, Michigan against Rutgers. Michigan won at home 35-14, kind of like they should. Their running back ran for 150 yards, 2 scores. Brandon Peters actually came in. That's the one highlight, I guess, spotlight that I wanted to take from this game. Brandon Peters is a sophomore. He was a pretty big recruit, the number 1 kid coming out of Indiana a couple years ago. He is a sophomore, he's a redshirt freshman. It's his second year at Michigan, and he came in for John O'Korn, who people have been kind of calling his head for. After he took over for Wilton Spate, who got hurt, in came John O'Korn. John O'Korn's been playing like crap. He starts this game against Rutgers, 3 for 6, 13 yards, 1 pick. That's not getting it done. So Michigan made another change at quarterback. The first one was due to injury. But from Spate to O'Korn, now we're to Peters. And Peters looked pretty good. Again, it was against Rutgers. He is a highly talented kid coming out of high school. So I think that this could be the guy of Michigan's future for the next few years. I do think that's possible. I like Peters going forward. But, again, you're on to what was your third-string quarterback going into the year. Michigan just barely outside the top 25, according to the chairman of the College Football Playoff Committee. So 6-2, Michigan's doing their thing right now against teams like Rutgers. But if Peters is the guy going forward, it's definitely something to watch for if he's going to be the guy, I guess, long-term. Assuming Spate kind of is still hurt for the next few weeks. And O'Korn, to me, is just benched, and he is staying on the bench to this point. But in short, Michigan got a new quarterback, basically, some time, and looks to be the starter going forward, at least for the next few weeks until Spate gets healthy. And Michigan did its job against Rutgers.
Yeah, not much to say except that quarterback controversy there, Kevin, which it's kind of been there all year. Is like, who's going to be able to lead this offense that has this great defense? And even, defensively, they did what they had to do against Rutgers. I mean, this was a game that they should have won. They should have won by this score. To be honest, I know Rutgers, we gave them some love the last couple weeks. They pulled off a couple victories against middle-of-the-pack teams. I still think Michigan is a good team because you can't question that defense. I mean, I've questioned it because of what they've done. I don't think it's as great and elite as people think, but it's still good. It's still darn good. But Rutgers still put up 14 points on them. But the big thing, like you said, Kevin, quarterback controversy there. I don't think O'Korn gets another shot. I don't think Jim Harbaugh is going to do that. He's going to have to try to salvage a season so far that when you're looking at it, probably not where they thought they'd be at this point, out of the college football rankings. So, yeah, that's got to probably sting in Harbaugh's gut. And so I think, yeah, you're going to see a drastic move, and maybe it's Peters. Maybe it's Peters moving forward, because if I'm thinking, I know Jim Harbaugh is trying to make fans, boosters, all those people happy. But at the end of the day, you got to look at it. You mentioned it, Kevin. You got 2 losses. Are you really getting to the college football playoff? No, not happening. So what are you going to do? You're going to move forward with O'Korn, or are you going to let this Peters kid play, who, like you said, is probably the future of Michigan football? I'd give him the reps. I'd let him play. I'd let him play Big Ten football, get as many snaps as he can. If he's the guy of the future, let him go. Just take the leash off and let him go. It's not going to get any worse. O'Korn has pooed the bed. I'm back to this. I'm on this poo the bed kick now with these players. O'Korn has pooed the bed. He's not taken that offense and done anything with it. Let Peters have a chance. If you believe and you recruited him to be the future of Michigan football, then let him play. I know that I've always said, and I'm kind of contradicting myself for those that listen to our Saturday show, about throwing people into the fire, but I think it's a little bit different here, Kevin, with college football in this situation. I think the kid has sat for a little bit. He's been in camp. He's learned a little bit. He's probably got a lot to learn as he's third on the depth chart. But you're looking at your second-string quarterback. You're even looking at O'Korn. Is he really much worse than that? I'm not even talking about the best chance to win. I'm talking about this kid. If he's been there practicing, to me, college football a little different than the pros because of the style of play in the game. I know the game is the same, but there's a huge difference among the speed. And when you're talking about college football and the way that they coach kids, you got some prima donnas in college. But I'm looking at this kid, Peters' kid, he's probably chomping at the bit. He's probably absorbing everything that he can in practice and taking every rep that he can. Now, again, I'm not a practice. I don't know. Maybe he's not. If there's a Michigan beat reporter or a Michigan fan that knows something I don't know about this kid, then let me know. Find me on Twitter, Troy Robert 967. Find the youngster at Kid Cunny, KIDCUNI. Let us know if we're way off base here. But this is a kid that's probably chomping at the bit. He's been in camp long enough. He's been part of this team. Rip and go. Let him go. Because the options in front of him are not good. Let Peters have a chance and just let him go. That's what I got.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. He's also sat for over a year. Again, he's a redshirt freshman. It's a little different story. Also, if you want, the people listening to the show, Google who is Brandon Peters, and you can find my article at Land of 10, as I wrote a Who is Brandon Peters article for Land of 10 a few weeks ago. And now, actually, it's relevant. So, number one story on Google, who is Brandon Peters? That's mine. I don't know if it will be when you're listening to this show, but as of now, it is, because people want to know who Brandon Peters exactly is. I wrote an article about it a few weeks ago. I will move on. The last, game that was kind of not over until the last second, but again, it was a one-possession game before we get into the fireworks that was this past week of Big Ten football. Iowa beat Minnesota. Iowa was at home. They won 17-10. They were up 14-0 going into the fourth quarter. Iowa was at home. They beat a team that they should have, and it wasn't a dominating victory, as I would have assumed, because it's Iowa. They did what they needed to do against a Minnesota team. I have nothing to really crazily add about this game other than Iowa did what they should have done at home by beating a Minnesota team that's a little less talented than them, but they shouldn't have crushed them. So it just the game went as expected.
Yep, Iowa won. There's my synopsis. Iowa won. A battle of two mediocre teams. Iowa pulled out the victory. Move on.
Nebraska went on the road and beat Purdue 25-14. That game ended with 14 seconds left. There's still a couple of the Big Ten games we have to get to, but this was, the least exciting of them because it was Nebraska and Purdue, unfortunately. But Nebraska, 14 seconds left. Tanner Lee, the quarterback, throws a touchdown pass to Stanley Morgan Jr., who also made fun of a 5'9" Nebraska kid on his own team for Halloween because he basically went his Halloween costume was him basically being short. He was, I think, on his knees. He was being a teammate. That was kind of funny to me. But Nebraska beats Purdue 25-24, basically a last-second touchdown pass. It was a very entertaining game. Again, it just wasn't Penn State-Ohio State because it wasn't Penn State-Ohio State. As far as the names of the teams, Tanner Lee, the Nebraska quarterback, people were very curious about how he'd play this year, certainly ups and downs with not only him, but the program as a whole. He threw for 430 yards, 2 touchdowns in this game. Throwing for 430 yards in any college football game is impressive enough. Your team only scores 25 points because of it. It's very weird. But Nebraska showing that they can beat these middle-of-the-road teams. They're 4-4. They might go to a bowl game, which, Troy, you will certainly laugh at because that absolutely means nothing nowadays. But Nebraska got a win on the road that they probably should have, considering they are the name brand of Nebraska. Sucks that they lost their number 1 2018 recruit. I won't say sorry to any Nebraska fans for that. But in the end, you beat a Purdue team that just has been so close to get certain upsets this year throughout the year. But now they are 3-5. We were talking about this team when they were 2-1, saying, man, this team's actually could be pretty good. And yet they're here at 1-4 in the Big Ten now because they just keep losing close games. They're just not of the same caliber as these upper echelon teams. Not that Nebraska has won. Again, it took a last-second touchdown to beat them. But Purdue is knocking on the door of getting better under Jeff Brom, a new head coach. So Purdue's right there. It's just probably frustrating to be a Purdue fan at this point.
Well, I think it's frustrating, but if I'm a Purdue fan, I'm looking at it from the standpoint of, man, so close, just there. They're in games. It's better than rebuilding and getting blown out. I mean, take a look at Lovie Smith. You know, he is not in games. You know, you look at Purdue, they've got some talented guys, and even though it hasn't equated to wins, I'll tell you what, as a coach, for those listening in, I took a Division III team to Division II, and there were some games, Kevin, we got walloped in soccer 7-8 to nothing. And people know in soccer that's a butt whooping. So those close games that we had, even though we didn't equate to wins, those were exciting for me. Like, look, we can play with some of these guys. We can be here. We can be here. And it's hard when you're taking over and making that transition to another level to keep the kids' confidence level up when you're playing some top teams in the country and losing 7 or 8 to nothing. You know, a UW Milwaukee or a UW Parkside, Lewis University. I mean, these are some of the teams we played, top Division II schools in the country, and losing 7-8 nothing. That can be demoralizing. But then you play some other good middle-of-the-pack teams, and you hang in there. And when you're rebuilding and doing things of that nature, yeah, it sucks. But as a coach, you can look at it and say, man, we're just a couple pieces away. We're a little bit of experience away. We can see the progress. And that's what I see in Purdue. I see a Purdue team that, hey, don't shut the door on them yet. Don't think they're just going to be a pushover. If you have Purdue on your schedule, you better come to play because they're coming to play. And Purdue's going to give you a game. They may not win, but they're going to make you fight for 60 minutes to earn a victory. That's what I like about Purdue, youngster.
For sure. No question about it. I'll move on. Indiana traveled to play Maryland, and Indiana's Peyton Ramsey, the quarterback that I somewhat called out a week ago as being the non-throwing quarterback, non-better throwing. That doesn't it makes sense, but it's not the right word choice. Regardless, threw 31 of 41, completed 31 of 41 passes, had 3 touchdowns, almost 300 yards. Maryland scored on a block punt in this game. Again, Maryland won 42-39. High-scoring affair, very entertaining. Simi Cobbs Jr., the Indiana receiver, who I've liked since a year ago, but game 1 against Ohio State absolutely showed up for Indiana. Had a couple touchdowns in this one, but in short, Maryland wins at home against another very mediocre program in the Big Ten in Indiana. Maryland's 4-4 overall. I guess sniffing toward bowl territory. That's basically all I have to say about that one.
What bowl territory will they be sniffing? Will it be the Sniff-A-Lot Bowl or the here's another meaningless bowl? I don't know. Everybody gets a bowl, but you can move on. I don't really have much to say in this game other than You look at it, and, Indiana's got some things to figure out. Maybe Ramsey's the guy. I know that, like you said, you called him out. But, Maryland, that's another one of those teams, Kevin. I mean, my hat's off to him, and I think maybe I'm on the Maryland bandwagon because what are they on, their 20th quarterback now? I mean, they haven't had a quarterback injury in a while, so that's good. But I give my hats off, and maybe I'm jumping on Maryland and rooting for them just because of the adversity that they've went through. I mean, it was every week they were changing quarterbacks. So I think I'm kind of jumping on Maryland and kind of rooting for them when they're playing because nobody's giving them a chance. But they're college kids. College kids like to go out and play. Do they listen to the media? I would imagine they do, and it can get to them. But for the most part, these kids love to play. And that's what I see in Maryland. They're not letting, what are they? And seriously now, they're on their fourth-string quarterback, I believe.
I was going to say, unless you've got another you can finish, but basically they were down to their fourth-string quarterback. It looks like they're back to their third string now. He's who played in this game.
All right. So, I mean, hey, things looking up in Maryland. I just like the way Maryland plays. They're not making excuses. They're going out and playing. They're not waving the white flag because we got our third or fourth string quarterback in. They're going out and playing. And you know me, I'm the old man. I'm a blue-collar guy. I like when teams play that way, that just go out and play good, hard-nosed football. That's what Maryland's doing. And, yeah, this was an exciting game. I mean, it's a game against the porous Indiana team, but, hey, it was a game. They went out and played. I watched, the highlights of it. I didn't watch any of the game, but good for Maryland.
Indiana's got a halfway decent defense, too. So for Maryland's third-string quarterback to go out there and lead the team to 42 points in a victory, that's pretty impressive. Imagine if Maryland had one of their top two quarterbacks. The second one came in and did not show any let-up from the first one. I think they're on a different playing field than the third stringer. But this Maryland team is not terrible, especially if you give them their starting or even second-string quarterback, to be honest with you. Last thing I wanted to mention, Ramsey, 31-41, the backup now, Richard Lagow, who I think is the better thrower, 12 of 21, not as accurate, but also had 2 touchdowns, 0 picks in the game. So the quarterbacks for Indiana combined for 43 of 62 passing for 410 yards, 5 touchdowns, 1 pick. Indiana can throw the ball. They've got receivers who can catch it. That much I know about Indiana. I'll move forward. Michigan State, Northwestern. Before we get to the big one, Michigan State was the favorite. Troy and I picked it as a lock of the week that Northwestern would pull the upset, and they did. It took overtime. It was actually 17-17 going into overtime, and then the game's final score was 39-31. So Northwestern scored.
You gotta love college football overtime rules. Just gotta love it. It actually is, to me. It's exciting, and I know people have said, well, they should put that in the professional. No, they shouldn't. It wouldn't be the same effect. But I do. I enjoy the overtime rule in college football, Kevin. I know people say, oh, it's crazy, but I like it. I really do like it. I don't know what your thoughts are there. I know we're talking about this game, but I guess we can go off the tree limb for a little bit. I love college football overtime rules.
Yeah, I think it is crazy, like you said, and I like it because of that. It's college. You're not paying these guys millions of dollars to make everything perfectly even, like it also isn't in the NFL, but how they try to in overtime. And so, I give them the ball on the 25-yard line where a 42-yard field goal for most college teams is difficult, and you've got to get almost a first down to ensure a solid field goal attempt. Make it interesting. Even then in college, youngster, I'm going to interrupt. Even then, a 32-yarder in college, that's no gimme. Yeah, I hear you. So it's entertaining to me. I'm all in favor of it. If you pushed it to the 50-yard line of the NFL, I think even that would be entertaining. That would be more entertaining to me than just a 10-minute overtime period. I understand you want to get off the field as quickly as possible, but you can. You score a touchdown and you stop them from the 50 instead of taking a touchback and starting from the 30 in the NFL. I think, in short, it's more entertaining. And so I'm a fan of it. If you implemented it and changed things a little bit to the NFL, I'd be perfectly fine with it. my take on sports is I want to be entertained for the most part. And so this is entertaining to me. 22-14 in the overtimes and seeing these teams go back and forth was just fun. To get a little into the game, Clayton Thorson for Northwestern, the quarterback, threw for 350 yards. Justin Jackson, the program's all-time leading rusher, stopped to 17 carries, 41 yards, hats off to Michigan State's defense. On that one, again, they only gave up 17 points in regulation. Michigan State's quarterback, though, was kind of the story of the game, in my opinion. Brian Lewerke, a sophomore, threw for 445 yards on Northwestern. 4 touchdowns. It is what it is. Again, there were 3 overtime periods in this game, but
I'm gonna throw this in there, youngster. The one thing that I dislike is that stats count. I don't think you should count the overtime stats,
right?
Because they just pad them. I think people will say, well, it's still part of the game. It is, but it's a different period, and it is totally different. You're not moving down the field. I don't think they should count overtime stats in the regulation stats. If you want to take and do separate stats, like here's the overtime stats, fine. But I don't think that should be counted as people pad their stats in overtime, because you see some of these overtime games that get to be like 62-59, and you got a kid with 7 touchdowns because he scored a bunch in overtime. I don't agree with that. I think the stats should end. If your college football game goes into overtime, stats also stop. I just wanted to throw that out there.
I hear you. Even if you give Lewerke like 50 yards passing and say he throws for 25 yards in 2 of the overtimes and scores, take out the scores. I don't care about the scores, but he still threw for, I would assume, over 400 yards in regulation against Northwestern. Not that passing yards is the be-all, end-all either. But I think Lewerke is getting better. This Michigan State young core is getting better. I think that's why a lot of people were kind of calling for D'Antonio's head, was because they had a terrible year a year ago, and then
gotta fire D'Antonio. Gotta fire D'Antonio now.
That's what they were saying. And so you figured with a tougher schedule and a young team, they might not make a bowl game again. And again, making a bowl game is pretty easy nowadays. So if D'Antonio does it 2 years in a row, who knows what happens. But this Michigan State team obviously responded in the first 7 games, going 6-1 before losing this one, which I'm happy about because I love D'Antonio. I think he's an excellent coach. This team is young, and its quarterback is young. I think they are getting better, though, despite winning by 7 points against teams like Indiana, or winning by 3 against Rutgers, or losing to Northwestern. I think this team is gaining experience. I don't care where they finish in the polls, if they finish in the top 25 this year or not. They're young. They're getting better. They're getting valuable Big Ten experience, like you mentioned before in the show. I think Michigan State's just getting better, and Lewerke is going to be a senior in a couple of years, be a junior next year. I think this Michigan State team is rising. And, again, they sniffed the top 16 this year with a very young team, young quarterback, not a fantastic running game. I like this Michigan State team going forward, starting next year.
Well, I'll tell you, they got the 2 tests back-to-back. Do I think they got a chance? I'm not going to let the cat out of the bag. I'm just going to play neutral sportscaster right now. Michigan State, who would have thunk when we're 8 games in that they would be one of the top 3 sitting in that division? Nobody, myself included. Their test is the next 2 weeks, Penn State and Ohio State. So they have an opportunity. If they could upset one of them, Kevin, and that doesn't ensure a place in the Big Ten championship. But if they could win one of these next 2 games, that would be the seal of approval on this season. I don't even think it needs to be a seal of approval for D'Antonio to keep his job. But if he won one of these next 2, if I was him, I would just laugh at the media. I would laugh at the boosters. I would say, you wanted me gone? Now look. I'm not saying, and we'll preview the game, but Michigan State, who would have thought that after 5 games in the Big Ten regular season, that their hopes to win a conference title would still be alive in 2017. I didn't think they'd be 4-1. I didn't think they'd be 1 game out of first place. I thought they'd be in the middle of the pack. So hats off to what he's been doing there. And really, I have to give hats off, Kevin, to deal with the adversity, to deal with the criticism, to deal with the rumors. As a coach, you got to put up with that. I'm sure it added some pressure to him. He probably won't say it did. He'll probably say, I just went about my business, did this. Yeah, okay. When you go home at night and eat dinner, I'm sure it eats at you. So my hat's off to him and what Michigan State's doing. He's a good coach. And we said when those rumors came out, Kevin, grass isn't always greener on the other side. It's not always greener. And look what he's doing with that green team over at Michigan State. He's got them near the top of the Big Ten. What more can you ask for from a guy that doesn't even have the talent level of Ohio State or Penn State and Michigan for that matter? And they're ahead of Michigan. So hats off to him. That's all I got.
Yeah, I loved it. I loved Antonio. I'll move forward. I've got nothing else to say on that. I love D'Antonio. I think he's taking this program and soaring with it from the low light that was last year. No question about it. Finally, to move on to Penn State traveling to Ohio State, number 2 versus number 6 at the time, according to the AP. Now it's number 7 traveling to number 6, I guess, is how the College Football Playoff Committee would have seen it. But Ohio State wins the game 39-38. I'm an Ohio State fan. I was certainly not too impressed with the opening kickoff, and Saquon Barkley took that to the house. Second one of the game, and then Ohio State fumbles, and Penn State scores, and it's 14-0. And then Ohio State punts. They force Penn State to punt, and Ohio State gets a field goal out of it. And then they force Penn State to punt again. And for some reason, Ohio State actually went for it on 4th down at Penn State's 25-yard line. It would have been a 42-yard kick. We had mentioned this before about field goals and 32-yarders, 42-yarders, even 32-yarders can be hard. I know Nuremberger. I know the Ohio State kicker can make a 42-yard field goal. I was surprised that Urban Meyer went for it on 4th and 8 in this game, down 14-3 in the first quarter. I was surprised they did not attempt a field goal. Maybe they assumed that it was a 50-50 shot. If you miss it, you're down 14-3, you miss a field goal, you give Penn State the ball on their own 42-yard line. I get it. I understand it. I was just surprised because I know he can make it, and I knew points were going to be important in this game, obviously, as only 1 point decides the game. So that was surprising to me. That was the end of the first quarter. After the 4th and 8 miss by Ohio State, Penn State scores. It's 21-3. So at that point,
did you have gray hair like I'm getting?
Yeah.
I have gray hair. I'm an old man. I have like little sparkles of gray hair going on. Did you have gray hair after that first quarter? Or first quarter and 5 minutes?
Well, it wasn't good. Was not too thrilled with that one. I didn't think the game was over, but Ohio State needed answers, and J.T. Barrett provided answers throughout the game. I think he finished the game 16 of 16. His last 16 passing attempts from behind, throwing the ball. Penn State knew they had to throw the ball because of time, because of losing, and they still couldn't stop J.T. Barrett and his arm. I mean, J.T. Barrett and his legs did fine in this game, for sure. I think that when he wants to run, he can be effective at it. He picked up 95 yards in the game on the ground. He also ran it 17 times, a little over 5 a carry. Again, he was effective running the football. But 33 of 39 through the air against, again, the number 1 scoring defense in the country to this point, 4 touchdowns, 328 yards. J.T. Barrett was putting the ball where it needed to be, obviously. Again, 16 of 16 to end the game. And touchdown drive after touchdown drive after touchdown drive to end the game. It was just unbelievable to see Ohio State come back down 21-3 with J.T. Barrett and his deficiencies on throwing the deep ball. I still 100% believe they're there, but he was so much more accurate than he has been the last couple of years in throws that were 10-plus yards down the field. I mean, they weren't bombs. He wasn't throwing 30-yard darts, to the sidelines. but they were 17 yards and 20 yards and throwing back shoulder throws, and it was like, well, what is this? I mean, J.T. Barrett looked like he was back in his freshman year when he looked like a really good quarterback. And then his sophomore year, junior year, kind of went into, I want to be a pocket passer and prove the doubters wrong, and I think that got to him realistically over the last couple of years. But that game against Penn State, I mean, now I think the sky's the limit, because I think this defense, the defensive line in particular, can take games over when they needed to. They held Penn State to 10 points in the second half. They held Saquon Barkley to 21 carries for 44 yards. His longest carry in the game was a 36-yarder. So if you take that out, 20 carries for 8 yards. That's what Saquon Barkley had against Ohio State. I think Ohio State's defense, the rush defense in particular, and if the defensive line can pin their ears back and have a lead on teams, that's the number one defensive line in college football for the last 10 years. I love this Ohio State defense from the front four perspective. I like their linebackers as well. But the secondary is young. But if J.T. Barrett plays like this team can absolutely beat anybody, and I think they will win their next 5 games. That includes the Big Ten title game against Wisconsin. I think they win that game. I think they win out. I think they finish in the top 4. And then who knows what happens. You're going to play an Alabama or a Georgia for sure. That'll be a tough game. But regardless, I think Ohio State now, with that performance from Barrett, I think they do win their next 5 games, get into the college football playoff, and then who knows what happens. That's all you can really ask for if you're any team, is just to get into the college football playoff. But to see Barrett perform like that was magical from an Ohio State fan's perspective.
Well, I'll tell you, Kevin, this Barrett thing, we talked about it as he was putting up some good numbers against mediocre teams, and we said, well, you should be doing that. You're playing against the quality of opponent that isn't as skilled as your guys. Cornerback play is not good on these mediocre teams, and you need to be more precise. You need to do this. You need to do that. The one thing, Kevin, that maybe we forgot to mention when you're playing these mediocre teams is the confidence level that a player can get. And what I saw against Penn State was a J.T. Barrett that was confident. And I'm not saying he wasn't confident before, but I noticed this. And if you look at that game, the way the game started, it wasn't really on him. You got to return for a touchdown. You look at the way that the game rolled out, it wasn't that he was playing poorly to put them in a hole. I just saw something in him that I hadn't seen in a long time, and it was a confidence. It was an aura that I'm good. I can do this, and you're not going to beat me today. I literally, at least that's what I saw from a fan's perspective, and I have no vested interest in either one of these teams. I just like college football. I'm not an Ohio State fan. I'm not a Penn State fan. I just saw it from Barrett's side, and then what I saw on the other sideline was almost like a timid, scared Penn State team. Even when they had the lead, you look at the sideline, and that business approach is good sometimes, but it's almost like they were still doubting the lead. If that makes any sense to you, it's like they were celebrating, but not that passion, not that enthusiasm that you would be thinking that there would be. It was almost like a business-type attitude, and I think, I don't know, almost like they had doubts in themselves that, is this big enough? Can we really pull this off? It was almost like they were afraid of Penn State. And I mean, I could be wrong, but that's what I saw, Kevin.
Yeah, if you're up 21-3 on Ohio State, that you should be ecstatic. But they never, like you said, just the energy level never seemed to be there for what was such a huge, monumental game. I mean, if Penn State wins that, they're probably the number 1 team in the college football playoff committee's rankings. I mean, why would they be behind Georgia? Georgia's had some nice wins for sure, but Penn State going to Ohio State and beating them would just be the cherry on top. I mean, they would have been number one in the country, in my opinion. Surely would have been in the top 4, obviously. But you also, I mean, it's very weird how this game played out, and you mentioned it, that it wasn't like J.T. Barrett was playing poorly. It wasn't like the running game wasn't getting the job done. It's just a kickoff return for a touchdown. Yeah, now you're down 7-0. You lose a fumble, boom, Penn State scores, you're down 14-0. That's not you playing terribly. That's a kickoff going Penn State's way, and that's a fumble going Penn State's way. They pick it up instead of you do, and boom, they're up 14-0. I mean, outside of that, it was kind of Ohio State's game to dominate. At first downs, Ohio State has 10 more. Total yards, Ohio State has 240 more total yards in the game, over 100 more passing yards. You limit Barkley outside of that one run, 20 carries, 8 yards, even with that run. 21 carries, 44 yards. Ohio State dominated that portion of the game, had over 100 more rushing yards. Turnovers, Ohio State had 2, Penn State had none. They still came back and won the game. I mean, everything went Penn State's way to start it. And then after that, Ohio State just dominated. I mean, it didn't necessarily seem that way because of the score. I mean, Ohio State never had the lead until like a minute and a half left. But Ohio State, from just taking the score out of it, if you couldn't see the score, after the first 14-0 start, it was just like, okay, Penn State scores a touchdown here, Ohio State gets a field goal, and outside of that, Ohio State just dominated. I mean, that's just what it was going forward from that point on. So I was very impressed by Ohio State being able to come back against a team like Penn State in the manner that they did, dominating the game the way they did from a statistical standpoint. And again, outside of that 14-0 start, from a kickoff return, a fumble, and a touchdown given up off of it, I mean, you couldn't have asked for more as an Ohio State fan, if you are one. I certainly couldn't. I think their defense stepped up when they needed to. They obviously weren't spectacular, giving up 38 points. But again, you had a short field. You gave up a touchdown in the first quarter. You gave up a kick return for a touchdown. You take those 2 out, that's 24 points to a high-scoring Penn State team that has arguably the best quarterback-running back combo in the country. I think Ohio State dominated the game a lot more than people think they did because of the score throughout it and the final score. It's hard to say Ohio State dominated it, but in my eyes, they did, outside of that first, 2 or 3 series sequence to start the game.
Well, you hit it right on the head. I mean, take those 14 points away, and Ohio State probably runs away with this game. And like you said, you do have to point the finger on Ohio State. Like, you let up a kickoff and you lost a fumble, and turnovers are big. But if you take that 14 points away, Kevin, it's Penn State trying to rally here in the fourth quarter to come back and win this game. So, yeah, Ohio State, to me, very impressive. Very impressive, and you brought it up before. The way the rest of the season rolls out, if Barrett can play like this, then I don't know who's going to beat them. And they'll be tough to beat. I think their defense maybe gets overlooked a little bit comparatively to other defenses, but it was good. And people say, how can you say that? Look how many points they gave up. Well, it's Penn State offense. And I don't care how good your defense is in college football. If you've got a high-powered offense, offense is always going to win. You're going to give up yards. You got teams like Penn State that know how to finish. You're going to give up points. That's why I always go back to Wisconsin, because I'm a Wisconsin fan. You look at the points that they've given up, it's been against mediocre offense. What happens when they play a Penn State or an Ohio State that can put points on the board? It could be a laughing stock, because I don't care how good our defense is. The better offense is going to win. So you shut a team down even to let them score 28 points when you have a great defense. Well, do you have an offense that can score 31 or 29? Whatever you say. Can you score more than 28? That's the way Penn State is built. This is a quality win for Ohio State. And that's why I said in the rankings, I don't think I actually said this when we went through it. I thought Ohio State should have been in the top 4. Their loss was to Oklahoma, 6 weeks ago? They're a much better team now than when that loss happened. And I think Ohio State got the short end of the stick. I know there's still 5 weeks to prove it, Kevin. You brought that up a couple of times. But I think they got shorted here. I think the committee kind of shorted the Big Ten. I don't think Penn State should be behind Ohio State, but I think it should have rolled out Ohio State 4, Penn State 5. Because, again, I'll go back to it. Clemson lost to poo-poo Syracuse. So you put that back, and Oklahoma has not been overly impressive. So if you want me to go back and kind of circle back to where we started this show, it should have been Ohio State 4, Penn State 5, Oklahoma 6, Clemson 7. That's the way it should have been in my book. Ohio State deserved more because this was a huge win, Kevin. And I'll let you finish up on that, and then we can preview next week's games.
In short, I agree with you 100%. I don't have anything else to add. I understand Notre Dame at 3. Their only loss, 1 point loss to your number 1 team in the country if you're the College Football Playoff Committee. Alabama has just looked dominant in their 8 wins. Not that they have racked up great victory after great victory, but they've looked the part. So I get it. You're 8-0. You're doing your thing against teams you should be dominating, and they are dominating. So I get it. But Notre Dame at number 3, I get it as well. But like you said, Ohio State 4, Penn State 5, Oklahoma 6, Clemson 7. That's probably how I would put it as well, realistically. And then you've got teams like Wisconsin I would put over TCU. And then you've got maybe Miami over TCU. But Oklahoma State can score it as well at number 11. Washington at 12. Again, I think those top 12 really still control their own destiny, so to say. But Virginia Tech at 13, also with 1 loss, playing in the ACC, will have their opportunities as well. But, yeah, I guess nothing more to say about last week. For this week, upcoming Saturday, November 4th, finally, to get to it. Now that we're at least an hour and I think almost an hour and a half into the show. So we will try and go through these games as quickly as possible. We'll stick with Ohio State. Ohio State traveling to Iowa. Iowa's a solid little football team. They're not great. Ohio State should win. I am somewhat worried about a little emotional letdown at Iowa, especially on the road. I think it's possible, but
stealing my thunder there, youngster, about my key to the game. Stealing my thunder. Way to go.
I'm sorry. But Ohio State favored by 17.5. I don't know if they win this game by over 17, but regardless, Ohio State should win the football game. It makes me a little nervous as an Ohio State fan, the way it kind of plays out from a mental standpoint. But Ohio State, again, if Barrett plays to that level, they can absolutely beat anyone in the country, and that obviously includes Iowa.
Oh, yeah, they should be able to take care of business, but I have that same concern you do. You know, I talked about that confidence level. Well, sometimes that confidence level can be overflowing, and you don't know how to rein it in, and these are young kids. Now you look at the confidence level that I saw by beating mediocre teams, and you go to play an Iowa team. Now your mindset is we're awesome, we're great, we beat Penn State, we're one of the best teams in the country. We'll just roll down into Iowa and we'll just walk out of there with a victory. And before you know it, it's the middle of the fourth quarter and you're down by 10. That can happen. Doesn't matter how good you are. And we've mentioned this over and over on this show. It is hard to go on the road and win in the Big Ten, no matter what the other team's record is. Granted, unless you're a Rutgers in Indiana and in Illinois, and you're one of these top echelon teams. But in Ohio State, going to an Iowa, formidable team in Iowa. Do they have the manpower to take down Ohio State? No. But could mistakes be made on Ohio State's part? Certainly. And they could let Iowa hang around. And when you let a bad team hang around, bad things happen. That's all I'm going to say about this game. On paper, Ohio State should kill Iowa. But how is it going to be when they step on the field? Is it going to be, we still got to go out and play 60 minutes, or is it, hey, we're great because we just beat Penn State? And if that's the case, it could be a long day for Ohio State, Kevin.
Iowa was one play away from beating Penn State at Iowa. So, yes, I think Iowa can beat Ohio State at Iowa. It's that simple to me, especially the way it plays out, again, from a mental standpoint, like you said, coming off a huge win like that. The Penn State game was obviously, it meant more, for sure. It was more important to assess Ohio State. But this game at Iowa the week after, against Iowa. It's not against Indiana, against Illinois, against Rutgers, against Purdue, Indiana. It's Iowa. They're a real football team. They're not a joke. So at Iowa, again, one play away from beating Penn State earlier this year. They can certainly beat Ohio State. This game means a lot as far as really cementing where I think Ohio State is going forward. You're better than Penn State. That's cool. That's great, for sure. Penn State's a really good football team. I love that Ohio State beat them as an Ohio State fan. But this game at Iowa the week after, if Ohio State takes care of business, then I'll really think, hey, maybe Ohio State's the best team in the country. Right now, I don't know if I think that. If they take care of Iowa, that'll really speak volumes to me because of when this game is taking place. It's huge from a mental standpoint, in my opinion, so I'm very curious to see how that plays out. Moving on, we can go with Penn State at Michigan State, and that's actually a noon Eastern time start.
Woo-hoo! Right to the biggie. Right to the big dog.
It's a noon Eastern start. I figured I'd go time-wise with it. Not that Ohio State starts at noon, but had to start with Ohio State after their win over Penn State. Penn State at Michigan State. Penn State's favored by 8.5. As they should be, in my opinion. They should win this game by double digits. It's coming off a loss. If Penn State wants to make the college football playoff, they've got to win out, for sure. They might not even make the Big Ten title game at this point, so you've got to win out, and you realistically kind of have to win out pretty, so to say. And so beating a top 25 team on the road convincingly might be exactly what happens here. But I think Michigan State is figuring things out. I just think playing Penn State after they lose a game like that to Ohio State is not where you want to be if you're a Spartans fan. So I think Penn State wins. I think they win by double digits, but I wouldn't put a lock on it, so to say.
Yeah, I wouldn't lock this one up either because I think Michigan State can actually hang in there for a little bit, Kevin. I really do.
Yeah.
I believe that they have the makings. They've got some confidence. I don't think they're what's the word I'm looking for? I don't think they're a paper 4-1. I think they're actually a pretty good football team. And they could catch Penn State at the right time. I know that the old adage is you hate to be the team after a big loss because of the revenge factor. I think this game took a lot out of Penn State, Kevin. I'm not saying Michigan State's going to win this game, but I think they cover. But Penn State could turn around and have that revenge game and win by 28. They're that good. But I think Michigan State, if they catch this Penn State team snoozing just a little bit with that hangover, I don't think there's going to be a lack of confidence from Penn State. But, man, that was a huge loss.
Yeah.
Not that it dashed their playoff hopes, but, man, you hate to lose to Ohio State. You really do. Like you said, there was a lot riding on that game for Penn State. If they won, man, are you talking that maybe the committee put them 1 or 2? Maybe, because it's a win over Ohio State. And how is that going to play into how they show up to play against Michigan State? On paper, again, they should take care of business. But I also mentioned it before. Can Michigan State pull off one of the major upsets in one of the next 2 games? If there's one game, it could be this one. It could be this one due to the fact I'm going to the other end of the spectrum. Coming off that big loss, is Penn State going to be able to rebound against a very good Michigan State team? That's how I'm going to put it. I think Penn State still wins, but I think it's a struggle.
Yeah, I could fully see it that way as well. I could see it either way. Like I said, I think Penn State wins by double digits, but I can see it either way. Hence, no lock on that one. I will move on to Wisconsin, Indiana. That's also a noon start on ABC. For you Big Ten fans who are still listening to the show, hats off to you for over an hour and a half of content. Wisconsin at Indiana. Wisconsin should win the game, just like Ohio State should, just like Penn State should. Indiana, a lesser opponent than Iowa and State.
It won't be pretty.
Yeah. And Indiana, again, like I've said before, and I still stick to it, Indiana's got the best set of receivers in this conference. I think Indiana can throw the ball. I think they can score. I think they've got talent on the outside. I said it a couple weeks ago that this is the best offense Wisconsin will face during the regular season. I fully believe it. So I think Indiana can score. I think this will actually be a test for Wisconsin's defense. It'll say something if they hold Indiana to, 10, 13 points, especially on the road. I think that will mean something. Wisconsin's favored by 12.5. They should win by double digits, but it's Wisconsin. You just beat Illinois by 14. Why do you think you'll crush Indiana? I could see it going either way as far as a betting perspective. So no lock from me, but again, Wisconsin should win the game.
I'm not going to get long-winded on this because I've been known to do that, so I'll try to keep it short. Do not take Wisconsin in the points. Do not give the 12. Just don't do it. After the way Hornibrook played last week, I have no confidence in the quarterback. Taylor's hurt, and honestly, like I said, it's great to be a running back at Wisconsin. They can plug these guys in and find new guys here and there. But offensively, they're going to struggle. The defense has to win this game, and I shouldn't have to say that about an 8-0 team. I should not have to say that. But the defense is going to have to give this offense short fields, and they might have to get a pick six or a strip sack and a fumble return for a touchdown, because I don't see Wisconsin scoring a lot of points. I just don't. And Indiana, even though they're a cellar dweller, they have an okay defense. And like you said, offensively, they could put up some points. So this game is actually probably scaring me more than the Michigan game, Kevin. I think Wisconsin wins, but I said it's not going to be pretty. And it's going to be close. That 12.5, in my mind, way too many. I don't think, and you're saying you think they could win by double, I don't think they win by double digits, Kevin. I'm throwing Indiana's record out the window. I'm going by the way that Wisconsin is playing. Defensively, awesome. But like you said, they're playing against a good offense right now. Good offense equates to points. I'm not going to call the upset because I don't want to go on record and say this is the upset, but there's part of me that is scared of this game, Kevin. And I shouldn't have to be scared of Indiana, but I am. And it comes down to quarterback play. Scares me a lot, and if Taylor doesn't play, that scares me a lot too. Because what are you going to do on offense? This, in my mind, Kevin, could be one of those boring Big Ten games where you see about 20 punts and you see a game that is like 17-14, maybe even less. I know Indiana has an offense, but this Wisconsin defense is really good. This could be one of those low-scoring affairs that is actually boring, and my eyes start closing and my head starts bobbing because it's like this game sucks. It's too boring. And that's coming from a Wisconsin fan. So there's my thought. No lock on this one for me.
I wish I felt more confident about Indiana. Unfortunately, I don't. They're 0-5 in the Big Ten for a reason, but they do have capable quarterback play. They do have capable wide receivers. They do have a capable defense. Why they're 0-5 in the Big Ten, I don't know, but they're a better team than 3-5 overall, 0-5 in the Big Ten, in my opinion. I also wanted to mention this before I finish out the last three games, which are not all incredibly interesting. If we went by the AP, I just took a look at the AP poll. Again, I don't care about the AP poll going forward, but I wanted to mention this. The college football playoff, if it started today, according to the AP, number 1, Alabama, number 2, Georgia. Okay. Number 3 is Ohio State, which, Troy and I think we probably agree Ohio State could very well be the number 3 team in the country. Guess who is number 4, Troy?
Oh, I know who number 4 is. Number 4 is Wisconsin, dude.
Oh.
number 4 is Wisconsin. In the AP poll.
So much for that. Yep.
Yeah, I know where they're ranked.
2 SEC teams, 2 Big Ten teams, according to the AP poll. Wisconsin's number 4. And at the beginning of the year, they thought Wisconsin was, the 10, 11, whatever it was. College Football Playoff Committee has them at 9. We've thought all year that Wisconsin is probably around the 9th best team in the country. It's just funny to see 2 SEC teams, 2 Big Ten teams, Wisconsin this high up in the AP poll. It's funny. But now the AP poll does not matter. So just thought I'd mention it. You already knew where Wisconsin was ranked, though, so much for that one. Illinois travels to play Purdue, also at noon. Purdue should win the game. They are favored by 14 points, which is a lot for a Purdue team that kind of struggles offensively, it seems like, more than I thought they would this year. I'm not 100% sold that Purdue is going to win by over 14, but it is Illinois. They are at home. They very well could. No lock here for me. I think Purdue wins because they're at home. If Illinois was at home, I might go with Illinois to get their first Big Ten win, but I'll go with Purdue. No lock for me, one way or the other.
Well, this could be that game for Purdue. They're in every game. This could be where Purdue should win, but it could be, dramatical at the end. The one thing that you look at with Purdue is that defense and, can't hold a lead, or the offense can't make that last drive. A little bit of deficiency going on there. What was the line again, Kevin?
Purdue minus 14.
Woo.
Yeah.
No lock for no lock for me on that one. I know Illinois is not very good, starting a lot of freshmen, but man, that's a lot of points to have to give. That is a ton of points, and considering, like I said, with Purdue giving up drives, sometimes being a little inconsistent on offense. Yeah, I would not lock this one down either, but I do think Purdue wins this game.
Yeah, if you're locking Purdue to beat a Big Ten team by over 2 touchdowns, you've got some nads. I'll say that much. Maryland travels to Rutgers. Maryland's favored by 3 points in this one. Both teams are 2-3 in the Big Ten. Imagine if Rutgers was 3-3 in Big Ten play going into Week 11 of the college football season. That would be interesting to me, and it's all very possible. I think Maryland wins the football game. I think they are being underestimated here by Vegas, but they are on their third-string quarterback, so anything's possible. But I do think Maryland is the better team. They've got the better running game. They've got better players across the board, I think, and so Janarian Grant for Rutgers is Janarian Grant, but he is one guy. And Maryland is just the better team. I think they win the game. I can't lock it because I'm not going to lock a team on the road in the Big Ten with their third-string quarterback to win a football game, but I do think they win over Rutgers.
Well, we're going to disagree. I think Rutgers is going to shock the world right here.
Okay.
Yeah, we gave Rutgers some love a few weeks ago. I think Rutgers is – let me put it this way. I think they've figured things out for where their team is at. Mm-hmm. They're not a highly skilled team, but I think that team inside the locker room on the practice field knows what they can and cannot do. I think they know where their deficiencies are. They go out and they play. They've got a few wins. They're not like this pushover team to me that I thought they were 5 weeks ago, so I apologize to Rutgers football fans. I really thought, and I made fun of them. But they got a couple wins. They're just a team that doesn't have all the skill positions. They've got a great one, but they don't have a lot, and they don't have a ton of talent. But they play football, and they've gotten some wins. I think Rutgers is going to beat Maryland, Kevin.
Yeah, like you said, we disagree. It'll be something we'll mention in next week's show. Northwestern traveling to Nebraska. Both teams are 3-2 in the Big Ten. It would be weird to think that Northwestern, to the off start that they had, would be 4-2 in the Big Ten with a win here on the road. And it would be weird to say Nebraska's 4-2 through all this stuff that they've been through in the Big Ten through the first 6 weeks of the conference season. Big game for these teams, respectively, realistically. I don't think, obviously, their
loser will be eliminated from the Big Ten title chance. The reason Wisconsin owns the tiebreaker over both of them. So the loser will have 3 losses, but the tiebreaker goes to Wisconsin. That means Wisconsin would have to lose 4. So that's not happening. So the loser is the loser is eliminated. The winner has a slight hope, but you have to remember this, Kevin. They both have 2 losses, and Wisconsin owns the tiebreakers. Wisconsin losing 3 games the rest of the way, I doubt it. I mean, you can pretty much hand the Big Ten championship to Wisconsin because of those 2 early season losses that happened. But that's the way that it works. So,
yeah, at least for that division for sure. Northwestern's favored by 1 point in this one. Basically, flip a coin and you'll get your winner. I think Vegas sees it that way. I see it pretty much the same way as well. I think Northwestern is a better team, but you're at Nebraska. If Northwestern was at home, I would feel pretty confident in Northwestern winning. But Tanner Lee is getting better for Nebraska, like I mentioned earlier in the show. I think he does have some weapons on the outside. I think Nebraska is figuring things out despite all the craziness that's going on within the program. You've got your AD. The head coach is still there through all of it, and Nebraska's at home. So I think Nebraska can win the football game, but like I said, I think Northwestern's a little better. I think they're certainly more consistent in terms of where the program is with Pat Fitzgerald, the head coach, and knowing that Clayton Thorson's the quarterback and having your program's rushing leader in program history as the running back. I think Northwestern's more stable, I guess, is finally the word I got to think of there. But I think Northwestern wins. Would not lock it one way or the other, though.
Yeah, this is one of those games that's the coin flipper, like we talked about, and I've got to give it to the home team. Got to give it to the home team when they're this close. I mean, you got two teams, both 3-2. These are teams that are very close in skill set level. Either team could win. I give the advantage in the Big Ten to the home team when there's games like this. So my advantage goes to Nebraska, but no lock. I mean, you could see Northwestern go to Nebraska and outplay them and win the game. So no lock for me here either.
We're on to something, I guess. Your pick is the safer one for sure. I think it's interesting that Northwestern's favored here. I think the public perception of Nebraska's craziness is probably why Northwestern is favored, and that craziness is what's built in my head. And so, ideally, you laid it out perfectly.
And Northwestern got the big win, Kevin. They got the big win last week.
Yeah.
You know, we've talked about this, how Vegas can be and the bandwagon can happen so quickly and can fall off so quickly. They got a big win last week. So they're looking at that saying, well, you know, Northwestern got that big win. This team is probably not comparable to that. So let's favor Northwestern even though it's on the road. I don't agree with it. I think both teams are similar. Like I said, Nebraska's at home. I give the advantage to the home team.
You put it perfectly. I don't know why. Just listening to you for a couple minutes there, Troy, I don't know why I went with Northwestern. But I do. But I 5 minutes from now could very well disagree with myself. Finally, the last Big Ten football game, the only night game, is Minnesota at Michigan, which is kind of a letdown. But regardless, that is the last Big Ten game on November 4th. And I wanted to say this before we end the show with this game, that the Big Ten basketball season, which is when we started this show in January, I believe it was, we started talking about Big Ten basketball until April, basically, until the basketball season was over, because the football season was over when we started this podcast. So it's been fun to go from basketball season to basketball season now with you, Troy, because the basketball season in the Big Ten and college basketball as a whole starts on November 10th. So
we may have to, Kevin, we may have to talk to good old Coach Goodpaster, who's the founder of The Grueling Truth. We may have to do this, and I mean, we'd have to talk about our schedules and when we could do shows. We may very well have to do a go big or go home basketball show and then a go big or go home football show until the football season is over. Because if we don't, these shows will be 3 hours long.
Yeah, I hear you. There's so much to talk about, even with the cupcake games supposedly that go on. to start college basketball seasons, there's a lot of tournaments that go on. There's a lot of teams to talk about and upsets and just recapping the week's prior games and looking ahead to what's in the next week, especially with basketball when you've got 2, 3, sometimes 4 games in a week. There's a lot to go through with basketball talk. We know it. We've done it before. So, yeah, I mean, we could easily turn out 2 Big Ten shows the rest of the way through the college football season.
We may have to.
Yeah.
I love chatting with you for 2 hours like we did tonight. But, if we say we're going to go for an hour, that turns into 2 hours. So all of a sudden we're turning a 1-hour show into a 3-4 hour show because we've got to get football and basketball in. Woo-wee! People get sick of us at that point, youngster.
It would be very fun to do. So, yeah, next Friday, as we're recording this on November 1st, November 10th is the first day of college basketball, unless I'm missing something. I checked a few Big Ten team schedules. They all start November 10th on that Friday. And Michigan State actually plays the University of North Florida, which I'm a 20-minute drive from. So I know a lot about North Florida. If you want to hear about Big Ten basketball, go to thegruelingtruth.net. We will have basketball content on next week's show, whether it's this show, whether it's its own Big Ten college basketball show. We will talk about basketball next week one way or another. But regardless, also, check us out on Twitter at youngsteroldman is our show handle. We will certainly tweet out links for football, for basketball. If it's all combined in one, we have no idea at this point. But, again, we're going to talk about basketball next week because it starts November 10th. So, finally, moving on, final college football playoff game. Final college football game for the Big Ten on November 4th, 7:30 Eastern, Minnesota at Michigan. Michigan should win. They're the better team. They're at home. They're favored by 15.5, which is kind of a lot for Michigan, but it's playing a Minnesota team who has not proven itself whatsoever this year. So I think it's fairly correct, and I would love to see Brandon Peters. Well, he'll be on Fox. I'm assuming Brandon Peters is getting the start. So it'll be interesting to see him in a night game on Fox in the Big Ten, see what he can do. It'll be the only Big Ten game on. I'm going to have it on in the background while I work. Atlanta 10 shift, so it'll be interesting to me. But just in short, no lock here. I could see Minnesota keeping it within 14, and I could see Michigan winning the game by 16. I could certainly see either. But Michigan, again, better team at home. They should win the football game. And I think because of winning and being 7-2 and being Michigan, I think they'll make their way into next week's college football playoff top 25.
Yeah, they'll make it in there, and I think Michigan will win. It's a lot of points with all the questions on offense. I mean, they got a running game. They could run the ball 300 yards, and I could see them winning by 21 because Minnesota has just completely fallen off the face of the earth. So, but with that said, youngster, another show in the books, Hope you enjoyed the show, everyone. Kevin told you go follow us on Twitter at youngsteroldman, at TroyRobert967, or at KidCunny, KIDCUNI.